with the Ron and Fez Show, and standing by is Dr. Justin Frank. He's from the Department of Psychiatry at George Washington University Medical Center. His book is called Bush on the Couch, Inside the Mind of the President.
All right, we have him on the line with us right now, Fez?
He is standing by.
Hi, Doctor. Welcome to the Ron and Fez Show.
Hi, thanks. Great to be here.
Hello, Doctor.
Hi, how are you?
Where did you get the idea to kind of analyze the president?
Well, I got the idea to analyze him from watching him. And I was watching him and got more and more worried, and he reminded me of some of my patients who are ex-alcoholics and who think in black and white terms and have trouble thinking in complex thoughts, and they're kind of suspicious and paranoid, and he reminded me of them. And they use their kind of good humor as a way of kind of masking a lot of their troubles, and he just reminded me of that. And so I just started watching him and paying closer attention, and then a couple of people had asked me what I thought, and I started writing some notes, and one thing led to another.
What was there one red flag that went up right away for you?
Well, the earliest red flag was his inability to ever think of any mistakes he made. And that happened, it was, I don't know if it was a red flag, but it may have been code orange, but it was a flag nonetheless, in that he was on the Jay Leno show when he was still Governor Bush, and Governor Bush and Jay Leno asked him what was the thing he did in his life that was most embarrassing. He couldn't think of one thing. And he told a story about his brother who urinated in the family iron. And everybody loved the story. And I thought, that's weird. You can't think of one thing, even a joking thing. You can think of something.
So you kind of think that follows along with alcoholism?
I think that's one of the very great characteristics of people who've been had a long history of drinking. They're so used to denying things. They deny their drink. They hide their bottles. They don't want to look at their drinking history. So it's a very common behavior. I mean, other people don't admit to mistakes too, but I had a patient once who said to me, I said, this guy never admitted to a mistake. And finally, I was so exasperated after a couple of years, I said to him, look, have you ever made a mistake? He says, yeah, hiring you.
So as part of what you're saying about the president is that you think he's no longer drinking, though, right?
I think it would be very shocking if he were drinking.
But your point is that he kind of hasn't been treated for alcoholism? Or
he hasn't been treated. He was very much self-treated, and that took a lot of endurance, strength. Okay, God, I can't believe I forgot the word, but, kind of being very self-disciplined and stopping drinking. It was very impressive. And at the same time, he never did the ism part of the alcoholism. He stopped the alcohol, but not the ism. And I think that's the ism, which is to manage anxiety, to control things. That's one part. The second part is that there is chronic damage from too much alcohol, and people have trouble conceptualizing. They repeat phrases all the time. They make stories up, and they switch their story on a regular basis, like he's done with the weapons of mass destruction. But this was way before that. I noticed this. And then the DUI history, which, didn't come out until a week before the election. And then he said that he didn't tell anybody about it because he didn't want to upset his daughters. And in my experience as a family therapist and working with families, it's very important for children to know about things that the parents have done that have been mistakes, because it helps them learn. But in this case, both of his daughters have repeated his behavior.
As far as like maybe they picked up the alcohol gene and it's never been really pointed out to them that, hey, maybe you guys are a little susceptible to this?
Yes, and that you should pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
He's a person who is reluctant to pay attention to himself and what's going on, although he does pay very careful attention to his physical state, to having structure. He needs to have a lot of structure and a lot of organization, because I think he's got a lot of anxiety
All right. What else did you pick up with the president?
Well, the first thing that I picked up was that one of the things I picked up was that he has a very serious kind of competitive relationship to his father. It must have been very hard being his father's son, because his father was a war hero. His father was a very fine student. His father was a great athlete and a very successful businessman, and the son was none of those things. and yet went to the same schools as the father, tried to live up, but became a cheerleader instead of an athlete, couldn't really do very well in school academically. His father enlisted after Andover in the service to fight in World War II, whereas he listed in the Air National Reserve in order to sort of get out of fighting in Vietnam. So there's a history of always being one-upped by his father, and I think that can lead to a lot of feelings of shame, rage, humiliation.
Can it lead to getting Saddam Hussein since his father didn't?
It can lead to getting Saddam Hussein since his father didn't, and at another level, it can lead to identifying Saddam Hussein as the person who wants to kill his father, as opposed to himself. You know, you can sort of locate the aggression outside of yourself.
So you don't think he's close with his father at all?
I don't think so. There certainly is, no, every time I've seen them, you know, I've studied lots of videos and watched them together. There's a lot of physical, nonverbal communication that's pretty cold and distant.
Well, like, give us an example. Maybe we can start watching this ourselves.
Let me give the example. Have you seen any films? There's a video of him with at the presidential library, the first presidential library opening, and it's true. That was a while ago. That was when he was governor, and his father opened the Bush Library. And there's films of him standing in one place and his father in another place, and Bill Clinton is there, and there's some other people there, and there is this incredible tension between father and son that was really sort of surprising, because in those days they were supposedly much closer. There's lots of stories he uses that dismiss his father, even now. Like whenever he introduces Dick Cheney, he always says he's the greatest vice president in the history of this country. When Bob Woodward asked him if he consulted his father before Iraq, he says, no, I consult a higher father, which is a form of dismissing his father in addition to talking about his religion. But I think that he finds different ways to dismiss his father.
Do you think there's something to the fact that he calls his dad 41 and he calls himself 43? It's a higher number?
A higher number. I don't know.
Spence, you're ready to join in on this. You're ready for it.
Now I'm interested. Now, when you watch the president to analyze him, what do you get the most out of? When he's making a speech or more casual moments?
I get more out of the casual moments, although, because the speeches are not always written by him, or probably aren't, but I get a lot out of the casual moments, and I get a lot out of the press conferences. And then the interesting thing is, if you read on the White House internet page, which comes out every day, whitehouse.gov, for the president, I read a lot of his speeches that he gives in different campaign states and different places, and they print them all in detail. And when you really read those, you get to start seeing certain kinds of patterns. He's got a great sense of humor. He puts people at ease right away. He's very funny. I like his sense of humor a lot. But he also is so repetitive and so vague. He uses what is called empty language to describe things, and the words don't really mean anything. He says over and over again, they hate our freedom. But he never says what he means by freedom.
Right.
Ever. And that's a disturbing kind of thing, that people have trouble focusing and finding words to help them think. And one of the things that happens is that if you're trying to control anxiety and manage your inner fears of your own chaos, what happened, I don't know if people know this, but he was the firstborn, and his sister died of leukemia when he was 7. She was 3.5. And that's a horrible tragedy for any family. What happened in that family, however, was that there was no funeral and no discussion of it at all. And both parents write about that in their memoirs. And so he was sort of left to his own devices. And if any of you has been firstborn children have a lot of animosity towards the next one, who's the interloper here.
We're talking with Dr. Justin Frank from George Washington University. His book is called Bush on the Couch, Inside the Mind of the President.
Why do you think he makes so many mistakes when he's given his speeches?
Well, I used to think that he made mistakes because he has a problem synthesizing words, that really is a wiring problem in his head, that's some kind of verbal version of dyslexia, if you want to call it that. It's like instead of not being able to read, which I think he has a hard time reading, he's not able to put his thoughts together in a very clear way. And he has a long history of that difficulty. But I think that there are more, and so he has trouble understanding the meaning of the words he uses, which is why he makes mistakes. So, for instance, he does what's called, and we noticed this in psychiatry when I was especially very active on the inpatient service at GW. In the hospital, there are a lot of people there will do what's called concrete thinking. They can't use words in any kind of abstract way. So like if I said to somebody, sit here for a second, I'll be right back, that person would get up and actually sit in my chair. They would think the word here means chair, not even the room. Bush uses the word container, for instance, earlier I guess it was right around the time he took over, when somebody asked him about the policy of containment, and he said the policy of containment, which, as you remember, was against Russia in terms of containing their aggression, he said that the policy of containment doesn't hold water. And this is sort of how he thinks. He makes a concrete image of the word container and can't think in terms of anything more abstract. And you see this over and over again in his humor, in various things he does. And I think that's a real serious concern for a president. So that's another reason he has trouble with words and language. There's another reason also, which I think that he's indifferent to words, because words are so difficult. I think that anybody who has a bad reading problem and a problem synthesizing information, for them, the emotional experience is like swimming with weights on. I mean, it's really hard work. And I think that it's hard work for him. So he's almost proud of the fact that he doesn't read the newspapers. And he says that. I don't read the newspapers.
Right.
You know, whenever he's on vacation, he takes a long week at Crawford.
Yeah.
One of the things he will always say goes, I just finished reading a book.
Right.
Almost like he's bragging about how he finished a book.
Yeah.
You never hear another president say that.
Right.
No. He has to say that in order to brag that he's doing it when you have the feeling that he has not finished a book.
All right, we're talking with Dr. Justin Frank. He's written the book, Bush is on the Couch. All right, Dr. Frank, if the president read your...
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, please
I have one thought about the book thing, and that is that the book he took with him this last week was the 9/11 Commission report.
Right.
And he said he was going to read that. And do you know what he said about it after he read it? He said, this is interesting. And then he said, it reads like a mystery book. I mean, that's about the extent of the comments he's able to make about a book that is that powerful and that complex and that compelling. So that's what concerns me.
He likes to have things in a simple form, like when he was born again, the Bible, that was the way to go. Don't give it another thought. Off we go.
Right.
Yeah.
And the purpose of it, what I was doing in my analysis, was trying to help myself originally, and then other people think about why that's so appealing. And I think the reason it's appealing is because it protects him against anxiety. And the times you see the anxiety is when he has an unscripted question thrown his way, or the way he looked in that videotape after he was told that the United States was under attack.
In the Michael Moore film. Yeah. I always say, to me, everyone always talks about the Michael Moore film. That was the most compelling moment for me, was the president's eyes and kind of confusion sitting there.
Oh, it was so upsetting.
It's in those images, he really turns into a little kid. It's a little kid's face on him.
Yeah.
His eyes sink in.
Yes. And there's only 2 ways for him, or 3 maybe, to manage anxiety like that. And when he's collapsed, he detaches completely and glazes over. And Paul O'Neill described that in the book that Ron Suskind wrote. And I've always felt that that's one of the main defenses against anxiety that some people have, is they completely disconnect inside. And it's not like the detachment you have when you need to think something through and not be too emotionally involved, in making a difficult decision, or, medically for me thinking about something. But it's disconnection. And he went like on tilt and withdrew into himself, sort of like a turtle going into his shell, only it was psychological.
All right, let me ask you this. If you got a call tomorrow from the president, he says, I read your book, I think you've nailed me, what should I do, Dr. Frank? What would you tell him?
I would actually refer him to a colleague because I wouldn't be able to treat him because I have too much preconceived, knowledge. But the thing that he should do is find somebody to help him face his own shame about his trouble thinking so he can accept it more and so he can find ways to not have to run from his anxiety by this false pride of saying, oh, I read a book last week, or I did this, or I did that, and be all macho. Because what he does is that he imposes his need to be macho on the rest of the United States. And so all of a sudden, you're with us or against us. I don't need a permission slip from the UN. And suddenly we're in these wars, and in this war with Iraq, when there's a lot of evidence that he spent committed a lot of troops and a lot of time and money when Al-Qaeda is somewhere else, because we keep getting these codes about Al-Qaeda.
But he did get to put on a flight suit.
He got to put on a flight suit, and he looked really great. I thought he looked really cute.
Well, the book is Bush...
and the honesty, one last thing about the book. Yeah. The honesty, I felt that in the one time he was really genuine and not dressing up and not putting on a flight suit was when that reporter asked him on April 13th if he ever made a mistake, because it was like a reprise of the Jay Leno thing from 3 years earlier, only now he's president, and he couldn't think of one, and he hesitated, and he said, I'm not always quick on my feet. There's a lot of pressure on me. I'm uncomfortable.
That's when he didn't meet the press, and we thought he had a pretty rough day that day, being confused.
Yeah, and he just started sweating at the podium during that press conference. That was frightening to me.
It was frightening, but if it were a group therapy, I would have found that it was a breakthrough. In other words, it was the first time he was really being genuine. It's frightening in a president, but it was the first time I felt like he was being honest by letting people know that, he actually is scared.
What about him seeming to hurt himself a lot? There's a lot of that going on lately. He's falling off things.
It's really disturbing, and I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah.
I really don't know.
I've never even heard of another human being falling off a Segway.
No.
That's the one that shocked me.
It's the hardest thing to do, apparently.
And he did it.
And I used to think if anybody could do it, one of my kids might be able to.
Right.
Do it. But even they wouldn't be able to fall off a Segway. And then also falling off a couch and choking on a pretzel.
Yeah.
With no one around.
With no one around. So what bothers me about it, there's two things. One is, what is that about in terms of what does that mean about him and what kind of recklessness is going on? Because I do feel that he is a destructive person. He has a long history of being destructive, like he used to blow up frogs with firecrackers and brand pledges with hot coat hangers when he was in college. He's done a lot of things like that, but I never felt that he was self-destructive, but these things are really injuring himself. And I don't
Stay on the bike.
I don't know what that means. There's two big bicycle falls. One, he flipped over the front of the handlebars.
Yeah, it came right down on his face.
Yes. But that's one thing that bothers me in terms of what it means. But the second thing that bothers me is the media never even raises the question about whether he might be drinking again. And I'm not interested in thinking that he's drinking. I don't really think that.
Right.
But it's interesting that nobody even raises it as a question. And that is what you see also, that the nation is like a nation of children of an alcoholic father.
Oh, great point. When I remember after 9/11 when we started saying he was heroic that day, and I'm like, and I honestly thought Rudy Giuliani was heroic that day.
He was heroic. He rolled up his sleeves and went down there right away.
But then they just kind of put the same thing on the president. We want a dad. We don't want to all be adults ourselves.
We need a dad, and especially when we're in trouble like that and when a tragedy hits like that, we need a dad that we can count on. And everybody rallied around him. And what happened was he was flying all over the country. The only person who really wrote about it in a serious way was this guy, Nicholas von Hoffman, who wrote an article about a week later, and he said that Air Force One the name of it should be changed to the Great White Feather.
Just a second. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Frank.
Thank you.
The name of the book is Bush on the Couch, Inside the Mind of the president. That's Justin Frank. I'm going to point this out, Fez. I also read a book last week, so there I go. And it was interesting. Oh, it was interesting.
I am in the process of reading a book.
Fourth and Fixed I read. What are you reading, Fez?
The Watchmen series.
That's actually good. For a comic book, that's a damn good one. I also choked on a pretzel and fell off a bike. So
you're ready to make a run at the White House, my friend.
I'm going to tell you right now, if I did, even after all the things I did in my life, my numbers would be the exact same ones as John Kerry. I don't want John Kerry for a moment to feel like he's in this race because of him. Because I could have those same damn numbers.
The ABB numbers.
Yeah, the ABBs. We'll take a break. We'll be right back and reopen up the phone lines, 866-277-4969. It's the Ron and Fez Show.